I brought Senator Hann along. We want to talk a little bit about Race to the Top. I just want to start out, though, by saying we're 88 days in. We have 32 days to go, and that's not a lot of time. We've got our budget yet to put together. We've certainly got Race to the Top. We'll talk more about that to do. But then I think you step back a little bit, and we're looking at, again, we all know this, nearly a $6 billion budget next year, budget deficit. And as you think about, I think, where our state is and where we're going, there are a lot of challenges in front of us. And whether we talk about, in reference to that deep budget, whether we talk about how we handle K-12, how we handle higher education, you know, what about jobs? We've got 226,000 people on unemployment insurance right now. That's not certainly where we want to be. How do we turn this state around? I just think we ought to be spending time as we reflect on the rest of the session. We've got work to do, yes, but I think we also have some additional work to do in anticipation next year, and that's to deal with these great big issues, these issues that do relate to certainly jobs, to tax climate, to K-12 education, to how we're going to deal with the elderly, how we're going to deal with the disabled, how we're going to deal with those that can't otherwise deal with or fend for themselves from the standpoint of their very existence here in Minnesota. You know, we've got some social obligations there, but yet we're going to be very, very tight on money, extremely tight, historically tight. And so I would just hope as we move forward, notwithstanding certainly a convention day, I hope that we have some conversation as we go forward here. And my hope, frankly, would have been, let's just take Friday off, but let's stick around here because there is work to do. We all know that, and we ought to be about doing the business of the people, certainly to a greater degree than doing the business of our political conventions and all that goes with those. But moving forward, anticipating the end of the session and where we go from here, again, there's a lot of work to do. I think we ought to start on the work of next year to the extent we can and jumpstart that, move it ahead, get some ideas. One of the things this legislature seems to never do, we can't meet unless there's a bill in front of us. Why can't we meet and talk about jobs and job creation? Why can't we meet and talk about business climate? Why can't we meet and talk about how we're going to deal with higher education, K-12 education in the face of massive budget deficits? I think we need to do that. I think we need to spend some time as legislators doing that. And my hope would be as we move through the rest of the session that we do that. Now, there's many other issues out there that we can certainly talk about, but Senator Hann wants to talk a little bit about Race to the Top and where we are. There's a fair amount of urgency that's developed this week on that. We want to move forward, so Senator Hann, the microphones are yours.
Well, we all know that Race to the Top is a program the federal government has offered to the states. We have put in an application. We did not do as well as many had hoped that we would. And we did not make the final cut and did not get the award. There is an opportunity for us to reapply, and the Commissioner of Education, Alice Segrin, has talked about as a deadline for that to get that done by, I believe, May 1st. And so there is an effort to try to pull together another application, although the governor has made, and I think wisely and rightly made clear, that this will not happen unless there are certain things done legislatively that will change the way that the federal government would view our application. And I think those are the reform issues that the governor has talked about. And I think that to me, is the sticking point. Now, there's debate about No Child or Race to the Top, similar to with No Child Left Behind, about how far you want the federal government to be involved in K-12 education in the state. But setting that aside, the issues for reform and the need to reform K-12 education is important, regardless of whether or not we move ahead with No Child or with Race to the Top application. And so I think that the legislature ought to take seriously these challenges that are coming not only from the federal government but from the governor and from a number of people in the legislature, and have been for years. And to me, it is remarkable that there has been such resistance on the part of the majority party, and frankly, I think their allies in the teacher union, to take seriously any of these challenges, any of these ideas. And I hope that we will have an opportunity to do that. I think the governor has made it clear some of those things. There are some bills that are out there. There are bills that are not necessarily partisan. Senator Bonhoeff has a bill on alternative licensure, for example, that certainly would help. Those are things we ought to act on, and it's, to me, remarkable that we have not made more progress on it, and I hope we do.
Well, Senator Poggemiller said that he thought that we the governor needs to step in the room and personally come to a committee meeting Tuesday, get things done? What do you think?
Well, I certainly would welcome the governor showing up at our committee. He's welcome anytime. I think that's his decision. I'm not sure what that would change. If Senator Poggemiller is saying he doesn't understand what the reform initiatives that the governor wants to do, I don't think that's the issue. I think we understand what they are. To me, the problem is that you've got a teacher union and a DFL party that are so closely aligned that they cannot, I think, objectively look at serious reform, and that's what's needed. I don't know that the governor coming into the room is going to do that. That, to me, seems to be a discussion that the union and their allies in the legislature need to have and talk about what they can do and what they can change and how they can move this forward. But I would welcome the governor if he can show up, but I don't think that is the thing that is critical. We understand what the governor is asking for.
Part of what he's asking, too, is that the governor and the unions are in the same room, too. And he also said other governors had personally engaged more, that more was done under Ventura, Carlson, Queen, and that the governor's work style isn't as engaged with the chairs for education, and if he would come, he could maybe personally move this along.
Well, and I was not here when those governors were here. I don't know what the practice was if those governors showed up in education committees. I think, again, it would be certainly something that we would welcome. I don't know that it is mandatory. I think we understand what the governor's initiatives are. The Commissioner of Education has been before our committee a number of times, and she represents the governor's positions very well. So it's not something that I would say is mandatory, and I don't know, frankly, to what extent the governor is engaging in conversations on his own. But we as the legislature have an obligation to address the bills and the needs to pass legislation. And if there are legislative things that need to be done that could be helpful in advancing the race to the top, then we ought to be serious about doing that. And so far, I don't think that there has been much seriousness to do that.
Has the governor engaged you?
Has the governor engaged me? I've talked to him. I've talked to people on his staff. I'm one of those that is not as enthused about the federal involvement in education, but I'm certainly enthused about the ideas to reform education that are a part of that application, and I think we need to do that.